Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a huge pleasure to be here. The first time that I'm in Harvard, I've never seen it before, so it's exciting to be here, to be with you, and I'm looking forward to this conference. Thank you once again for inviting me. I was asked to speak to the question, who pays the bill for demographic change, aging and shrinking societies? And the sub-question is the Western welfare state at a crossroad. Well, when I got the question, who pays the bill for demographic change, the very short answer is those who are left over. There is no other answer. So that could finish the session already. I'm not going to be lazy, but I'm going to work a bit more. And I thought I want to talk to you at this keynote. Afterwards, we're going to have the panel about those who are left over. Because the short answer, too, is those who are left over, they will have to work smarter, and they will have to work harder. Otherwise, they can't pay the bill. But I think at the very beginning, to sort things out, it's important to see, is it really only a Western problem? And I would like to ask for the slide number 1. If I could get it, thank you. This is our globe today. And if you look at the colors, we have the proportion of population over age 60 is the darkest color, the dark brown. So you see it's Germany in Europe, and you have Japan. The rest is okay-ish. Now, let's please move to the second slide, which shows us how the picture will be in 2050. And this slide tells the whole story. Having those who have the dark brown color, I'd say approximately half of the globe. Those countries will have societies with more than 30% of their population being aged 60 and older. So the question, who pays the bill, is something that matters all of us. It's not only a Western question, it's also a global question. I want to have a look at those who are left over. They have to work smarter, they have to work harder. First of all, or let's put it the other way around. Where are the potentials to work smarter and to work harder, or different? We have to work different than today. Well, there are 3 groups I want to look at. First of all, it's the older worker, the older population. If we are 60 years and older, 30% of the population, we have to find an answer there. The second group I'm going to look at will be the female workforce. And of course, the third group is those who are young. It affects you. So, what is demographic change all about? Where's the origin for demographic change? The first reason is we live longer, which is great. During my lifetime, the average life expectancy has increased by 10 years. So these are 10 years of gained years in your life that you can invest. The question is, are we making enough out of it? My short answer, of course, is no. And I think what we will have to learn at the very beginning in aging societies is to change completely our view on age. We have a very stubborn view on age that specifically older workers are slower, they are less innovative, they are less productive. We tend to look at older people from the side of the deficit, what they cannot do anymore. This is totally wrong. What we should do is just the opposite. We should try to find out what are the things they can do, and they can do even better than younger people could do. For example, older employees, older workers have something which is extremely valuable. We seldom speak about it. This is life experience. It is business experience. You cannot Google life experience. You cannot Google business experience. You only can acquire it during your lifetime, during your professional lifetime. So we think to invest way more into these older population, aging population, strong part in our workforce will be one of the solutions you can offer to an aging society, to an aging globe as we see it over there. The second thing which is important, we've seen in research that it is the mix that matters. If you look at enterprises that have mixed teams, the young ones curious, coming from the university, pressing forward, the older ones knowing how much it affects the process if there is a mistake you do, having the life experience, the business experience. If you have the right mix within your workforce, productivity goes up. We have a very simple saying in Germany that says the younger ones might run faster, but the older ones know the shortcut. So if you mix that in a smart way, you'll be better off. Third thing we've learned, being one of these aging societies already, is you have to think about your work accounts during lifetime, the hours you work. Why not establish a lifetime work account? You can take from one enterprise to the next, from one company to the next with you. And in times when you have a lot of time, you invest a lot in your work. And in other times when you need time, I'm not only talking about early retirement, but for example, a sabbatical, or caring for the elderly, or caring for your children, being a good father, for example. You take time from your account. What we also see in Germany is, if you want to be successful in an aging society, you have to totally change your attitude towards educational system. We have an educational system that is very much focused on the young, of course. We see all you here, this is perfect and fine. Do you know education systems or settings that focus on people being 55, 60, 65 years old? To those who speak German here, the only thing I can think of is Volkshochschule. But it's certainly not the sitting we're thinking about when we're talking about medical doctors or engineers or something like that. So we have to think about, and we have to do a lot of research about what are the incentives and what is the motivation for older workers. And I'm not only talking about academics, I'm talking about the middle class, the working class, the skilled worker, to have a lifelong learning process. We've learned a lot, as you know, I'm a physician, we've learned a lot in the brain research that you have a learning capacity all over your life if the incentives are the right ones. You never stop learning, but it has to be the right incentive. And another very nice saying in Germany is, if you want to learn Japanese, for example, and you're 75 or 80 years old, don't go to the Volkshochschule, don't go to the community college. Just fall in love with the Japanese and it will work. So the incentive, the motivation has to be the right one. I love everything about education, but what I see is at the moment being, at least Germany doesn't have the answers. What is the proper education for people who are, for example, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70 years, just to keep up with the development, and then if you mix that with life experience, should be very fascinating what's coming out. One fifth thing looking at the older or aging population is so-called work-appropriate workplaces. Once again, I'm not speaking about academics. I'm speaking about the workforce itself, people working physically. If you look at those rare enterprises who already invest a lot of knowledge and research into the producing process, for example, of cars, how to reduce the strain, the physical strain on the workforce. It's fascinating to see how much engineering knowledge goes into computer-aided lifting processes, turning processes, how you bend, how you work, how you walk all day long. So I was not so much fascinated when I saw that how the car that at the very end comes out is being produced by people who are 60 or 65 years old. I was fascinated by the knowledge and the engineering techniques that went into this production line, and I thought this society who's going to be very fit in inventing new production lines for an aging workforce, will be the exporter later on when that happens and other societies will ask for that and ask for the answers. In other words, the society that is innovative in terms of age-appropriate working places, working hours, further education will be the leading society in that scenario. That's the older population. The second question, of course, I said the first origin of demographic change, reason of demographic change is we live longer. The second reason, of course, is there aren't enough babies born. So, of course, now we look at the female population. I'd like to do a very small experiment. There are many Harvard students here. You have a high probability to have an excellent career. Good for you. Now, just imagine all of you, you are gonna have 2 to 3 children. I guess, or assume, if we could measure the reaction in your head right now, we would find something that goes like, all the young men here in the room would say, wow, yes, I'd love that. Have a great career and have 2 to 3 children. And I guess the majority, let's say, of women here in the room would say, this is gonna be difficult. How am I gonna make it? And this kind of carries the story, the bitter and the sad story behind demographic change. I come from a country, and as there are many, many Germans here, you know the story, where this message was very strong over a very long time to specifically the female generation, the female part of the population. If you have education, the world is open. Just get a good education. But if you want to have children, you will have to choose. It's either career or being a good mom, putting emphasis on good mom. So the whole thing was covered with reproaches, bad conscience, and all that stuff. You know the end of the story. The end of the story was many, many women took a choice, either having a career or having children. And it was on both sides a huge loss. If you talk about careers, a loss of human capital, and if you talk about children, a loss of children that weren't born. So this is one of the reasons actually why in the first slide in Germany, or Germany with Japan, is the country that at the moment being has such a huge amount of older people in the population. But thank you, exactly. Let's switch to the second one. But if you look at that, have a look at China. One-child policy tells a story. So what I want to tell you is, if we look at emerging or, let's say, highly industrialized countries, the lesson we have learned, specifically if we compare with France in Europe or the Scandinavian countries, France, since 100 years, tried to put a lot of emphasis on it pays off if you have children. Scandinavian went from the egalitarian position on saying men and women should have the same chance to have a career and have children, so put a lot of emphasis on improving the childcare system, on introducing parental payments. If you look at highly industrialized countries today, and highly educated populations, you know or you see that if the reconciliation of work and family is good for not only women, but also men, if the father plays a strong role, so you share both, you will have more children and a higher productivity, because there will be more work of men and women and more children born. Of course, this leads you, and all those who are Germans here knows these stories, deep into the conflicts of role models and stereotypes. And we're talking on things like not only bosses and babies, but we're talking about childcare system, we're talking about schools, we're talking about family-friendly workplaces. We're talking about equal pay between men and women. We are talking about equal share of men and women on boards of companies. So you go deep into all these conflicts, but it's worth it. Because I do not want to live in a country on the long term who forgets about all what I've been talking about, what the caring moment is. I'm that serious about that because if you look at that picture, well, there is the question, who's going to care for the elderly in this picture? And perhaps not everybody does have children, but everybody, for example, in this room too, has parents. And often there is a son and not a daughter, and the daughters-in-law will not do it anymore. So if we want to have on the long term a society that is productive on one side, but caring on the other side, and I want to be old in a caring society, you better invest in the reconciliation of work and family for men and women at the same share. Third topic I want to talk about, I was talking about the children that haven't been born. Let's talk about the youth that is there. And of course, every aging and shrinking society has to invest a lot in the young generation so that they will have a perspective on the long term. If we look now at Europe in a nutshell, something absurd happens. We are in the process of demographic change or aging society. We have a wide spread of youth employment and youth unemployment, just to give you some numbers. Germany has the lowest rate of youth unemployment ever. Actually, we're desperately looking for young people filling vocational training jobs because they are not there anymore. Same with Austria, same with the Netherlands. And on the other hand, we were just talking, Mr. Papandreou and me, right before this session, in Greece at the moment we have 62% youth unemployment. Spain, 55%. Portugal, 36%. Italy, 35%. France, 20%. Actually, Sweden, 25%. There are different reasons for that. But there's one thing that is dominant. If you look at the differences between those countries I just named on one side and on the other side, you see that those countries with a relatively high youth unemployment do have school on one side, and then they have college and university, and nothing in between. And the countries with a very low youth unemployment do have in between a very strong pillar of dual vocational training. For a long time, dual vocational training was seen as old-fashioned, and for those who can't make it to college or university. But we've learned in Germany specifically over the last 10 to 15 years that if you establish a system that is well respected as an alternative to the academic system, it has to be really well respected in the society, then you all of a sudden create something, specifically if the employers are the one who take responsibility and offer these vocational training jobs. For those who are not German, the trainee doesn't have to pay for his training. He is being paid because he has a workplace in the enterprise. And then you have something which is very smart, because the employers only provide these vocational training jobs they need. So it's very much demand-driven, very close to the market. So you get the vocations you need in the future. You should not establish an artificial governmental-driven vocational training system because that won't work. So you have a strong demand-driven vocational training job, and the information has to go to the young people that there are lots of opportunities. Just to give you two more numbers, in Germany 50%, one half, of the young population goes into a vocational training. We have 340 vocations, so it's a broad variety of vocations. And what is, I think, most important to have it highly respected is you have to build a bridge from the vocational training, if people want it later on, to university and have an ongoing career. So it should not be a dead end. Sometimes when I'm being here in the United States and talking about the vocational training, I realize this is basically a model of public-private partnership. You have the public sector, education strain. You have the private sector, the employers providing the training. So on the long term, I think aging societies, specifically those at the moment being with high youth unemployment, should rely or build up such a system. Fourth point, I'm going to make it short because we can have it in the discussion. Of course, not only the older, the young, the female workforce, you need migration. But of course, I know, looking at that, the whole world will compete for skilled migrants if you look at that. This is a big story, but I think what we have to learn out of is don't ask where somebody comes from, do only ask what he or she is able to do. That should be the message for aging societies. I think within our discussion, Mrs. Nia, we could go to internal flexibility, we could talk about social security system. I do not want to take too much away at the very beginning. For me, it's important with this keynote here to say, 10 years ago, demographic change, I was scared of that. Today, I think it happens, whether you like it or not. So let's try to make the best out of it. And by now, I am convinced that if we do it well, we will have a chance to change from a deficit-oriented, lonely society view on the long term to an innovative aging and specifically caring society. And that's what I'm working for. Thank you very much.